Gauteng is the powerhouse of South Africa. Its annual budget affects everyone and has far-reaching implications for the country's economy. Gauteng Finance MEC Barbara Creecy today laid out her plans. In a tough economic climate, spending is up by 9.2 billion to 132.4 billion rand. Health gets 50.8 billion. 300 million of that is for the Life Esidimeni families. Education has been allocated 49.4 billion. But a budget just before election time is always contentious. So critics in the Democratic Alliance are warning that this is a typical election budget. They say the ANC is only spending more to try to win back Johannesburg by increasing social grants and salaries. Now, the DA who holds the city of Joburg says that money is taken away from infrastructure to pay for election gimmicks. Last year, Creecy pointed out that Gauteng underspent on its infrastructure budget, only using 77% of it. She actually singled out the city of Joburg, run by her critics, the DA, for underspending. I know this is a real bugbear of yours, isn't it? This underspending, why is that still happening, and what are the implications of it?
Well, Gauteng province spends 97% of its infrastructure budget. There is underspending on infrastructure in the cities. I think that the fundamental issue around infrastructure spending and how we got it right is planning and more planning. You can't start to spend infrastructure money on the first day of your financial year. You have to start the planning the year before. You have to advertise your tenders the year before. You have to be ready to hit the ground when the financial year starts. If you don't do that, you will underspend, and
you'll probably lose that in the next budget as well.
Well, or else you have rollovers, but we all know that as time goes on, the cost of infrastructure spend increases, and that's why projects that are long delayed have cost overruns.
And a dramatic impact. I mean, look at the 8 months that we're expecting of, road closures around Johannesburg. Is that a typical example of not spending the money in the right area? I mean, could that have been used in order to prevent this from happening?
No. The infrastructure underspend in Johannesburg was for the urban settlement grant. That was for infrastructure for bulk in housing projects.
All right. So this money, is it throwing good after bad when it comes to the health department? I mean, it's been pretty badly used there. I mean, levels of abuse and corruption. How do you plug in those holes and stop that from happening?
Look, I think that we're in a far better place in health than we were 2 years ago. We're in a better place than we were a year ago.
Not so much.
You're asking me from a financial point of view. We have a plan with all the major suppliers to pay them off over a 3-year period, and we have allocated money over that time to do that. Health has gone from 32% of its invoices being paid within 30 days to 68% being paid within 30 days. Of course, the rest, 92% of invoices in the rest of the departments are getting paid in 15 days. So obviously there's still scope for improvement, but I think we have to give credit where credit is due.
Agree.
I have substantially increased the money for goods and services to try and keep pace. We do have to acknowledge there are 20 million people who use Gauteng's health facilities. Our population is only 14.7 million. So we do have to admit that there's tremendous pressure on our central hospitals because they service de facto the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, but certainly all of the surrounding provinces. Yes, and although we are compensated by national government, obviously there is still tremendous pressure. We've also allocated 30 billion for spending on salaries, and there is additional money there so that MEC Ramakgopa can increase doctors and nurses, because if you don't do that, then services at the frontline facilities deteriorate further.
What about unaccounted for expenditure?
Well, you would have to be specific. I mean,
I know that's a pretty broad stroke, isn't it?
Of unqualified audits, 65% clean audits. So you would have to tell me this amount.
What exactly does it mean when you say something like that?
I have no idea what. We don't have unaccounted for money. You might say to me, what about financial misconduct? And I would say to you, well, let's take a case in point in the Department of Transport. There was a forensic investigation. There are 6 senior officials that are on disciplinary case. We've reported it to the SIU. There will be criminal charges. So let's talk about specific cases, whether we have or haven't dealt with it.
And what about the municipalities, the money used there, and if you put this into context with the VBS report and still waiting on unaccounted funds there?
Look, in the case of VBS, the Mirafong report is complete. It was handed over to the mayor. She did a presentation to the council in committee last week. She told me telephonically yesterday she would be writing to me to ask me to assist with the implementation of the recommendations of that report and formally referring the report to me, which she hasn't done as yet, but I'm sure in the next 2 days. The West Rand District report, I'm expecting it any day. It was due last week Friday. There were certain delays. I'm hoping that we'll have it any day. We'll then give it to the mayor. He will have to implement, once again, call an in-camera council meeting, share the findings. Council must take a decision whether they accept the recommendations. If they do, we'll help.
And the budget for education, how is that going to be?
49.4 billion. Obviously, the biggest chunk is for what we call public ordinary schooling, 37 billion. There's 2.9 billion, which is for special education for learners who have special learning needs. There's obviously money there in the budget for school feeding, school nutrition. We're feeding about 1.3 million learners every day. I think about R1 billion for scholar transport, which would include transporting learners who are living with disabilities. MEC Lesufi's PET project, introducing an ICT-enabled learning environment into schools. That's receiving about 800 million rand this year. Very important project, and I think it can be credited with significantly improving our maths and science results and contributing to the high rate of bachelor passes that Gauteng province has.
Okay, Barbara Creecy, thank you very much for talking to us about your budget that you laid out for us today.